All right, everybody, welcome to Unscripted One-on-One. And man, I'm excited. I even wore my Carolina Blue shirt tonight. I am excited. And I know there's a segment of my audience tonight that I just lost. And most of them live locally because I'm in Columbus, Ohio. For those that don't know, most everybody knows that. But I probably just lost a segment of my audience because I don't think they want to talk Carolina or hear about Carolina. But if they know me, they know my heart. And so, let me go ahead and let my guest introduce himself, and we will go from there.
Hey, so I'm Sherrell McMillan. I live in outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a suburb called Concord, North Carolina. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and just have a good conversation. Hey, Columbus, the two scholarship Carolina players in the last 4 years from Columbus. So that's more than pretty much anywhere else in the country.
That is true, and we'll talk about one of them because I got questions about one of them. But so
Okay, all
so
right.
we'll talk a lot of hoops, man, because I'm really excited. Like I'm like a kid at Christmas. I really am. So I don't.
Oh,
But
you raised the bar. I don't want to disappoint now. The standard seems pretty high.
no. You've been, and we were just talking about it offline for a quick second. And again, people probably hear this a lot now. I think I had a lot of my guests at the beginning were all good friends, and now I'm kind of expanding that circle of people I've never met in real life, I guess you'd say. As we were just talking offline, we've been following each other. I don't know how long on Twitter, and
Hmm.
huge fan of everything that you do. And I think I even said this to you, but keeping those of us outside of that North Carolina state, the state of North Carolina, keeping us informed on what's happening with the team. And I know a trusted source, because there's a lot of non-trusted sources out there on Twitter. But man, if I need to know, I know who to go to, and that's my guy. So tell us a little bit about what you do, and tell us a little bit about your story, your family, that kind of thing, and then we'll talk hoops.
Yeah, I'm a Southern kid, Southern boy at heart. I've lived in North Carolina my entire life. I've traveled well, so that's kind of scratched the edge as far as living somewhere else. So I was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I was born in Clinton, North Carolina, which is really, really small. But I'm from a small town called Hope Mills, which is right outside of Fort Bragg. My dad was in the military, my entire life. He was in the Navy for 20 years, and then he worked for DOD for I think 25 more. So like a career military guy. So all those things that you might expect from someone who was raised in a military family apply to me. Yeah, and then I have a Carolina family. So my brother went to Carolina, and before him, a maternal uncle went to Carolina, and before him, a maternal aunt went to Carolina, and before her, another maternal uncle went to Carolina, and before him, another maternal uncle went to Carolina. So, I have a all my family goes to Carolina pretty much. I had a little cousin who went afterwards, and a nephew who's there now.
Yeah.
So, it's something that's always been a part of us. I only applied to one other school because there was no place I really wanted to go other than Carolina because
Yeah.
my family had been there, and so it worked out. December 1st, 1999 is the day I got my acceptance letter. I applied early because it's where I wanted to go,
Yeah.
and it was a great day. I got the letter. It was a big one back when people still got letters,
Right.
so I knew I was in. So that was fun, and the best 4 years. People always talk about the best 4 years of your life. Like they
Yeah.
really were the best 4 years of my life. When I look back, outside of my children and my wife, just a great time, lifelong friends. People from high school I've kind of fallen off from a little bit, but my college friends are like I talk to them pretty much every single day.
Yeah.
From there, that's kind of when I got involved with the Inside Carolina piece. It started off as UNC basketball, as you know.
Yeah.
And so I met Ben Sherman, who's the editor of UNC basketball, about a year before it merged with Inside Carolina to become what it is now. That Buck Sanders had the football piece, and just got to know him. And over the years, we became, friends. I dare I say close.
Right.
And my goal for the longest time was to work in athletic departments, especially at Carolina.
Mhm.
And when I kind of realized what that entailed and um, that it just wasn't really in the cards for me,
Yeah.
then I kind of pivoted and I said, well, what can I do? And journalism is always something that I was interested in. So, I had my journalism degree from Carolina, and I had done some graduate work at North Carolina Central in Durham. I worked there for a while I was doing grad work, and then I went to a small newspaper in southeastern North Carolina in a town called Lumberton. Some people might know that's where Michael Jordan's father was murdered. So it's sad, but that's what the town is known for most, probably more than anything. So I was there for 3 years. I left there and went to a school called Fayetteville State, which is an HBCU in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I worked there for a year. And I said, you know what? Working in sports, you don't get to watch sports. And so that was another pivot. And so I left there and went into the corporate communications world. And that's where I'm at now. I work at a full-time, I work at a financial institution in Charlotte in the corporate communications group. So some twists and turns, but the good part is I get to do Inside Carolina work, which I'm not going to say I would do it for free, but it's fun. It's work I enjoy. So that helps me keep that work-life balance by having something after work that I do that I really enjoy.
Yeah, and you used to, now do you still, because I think you could correct me if I'm wrong, and actually let me pause real quick. I do this a lot, that's why it's unscripted. Let me pause because same applies as always. And a lot of people that have heard my podcast know the rule applies. If I ask you anything that's out of bounds with anything that you do for a living, you just say pass, and everybody understands. Can't answer that
Oh,
one.
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a ground rule, typical unscripted ground rule. So but didn't you used to do a lot of the recruiting stuff, right, on the weekends and the AAU? Weren't you spending time following some of those players? Or do you
Oh
still?
yeah, I still do. It's just that there hasn't been anything this year really since everything happened with the pandemic in March. The NCAA has actually grounded all off-campus events basically for recruiting purposes. So it really has been an atypical year because normally in April we're out on the road. We're in Augusta has a huge tournament in July. Usually in August we're in Atlanta. That's where the big tournament is. Then we go to Charlottesville in June, and then there's a lot of little tournaments in between Spartanburg, North Carolina, in other small towns in North Carolina. So usually April through I'd say July is pretty busy. Sometimes we go out to USA basketball in Colorado Springs. So didn't get to do any of that this year. So it's been for like with everybody else, it's been very, very strange.
Yeah. But you got to be home, and I guess that's, there's always a silver lining of some kind, and you got to be home, but at the same time, I'd be dying to get out and see the guys. That's probably a regular thing that you do.
Yeah. I mean, the first time in wow. When you get the age where you say, oh, that's the first time I haven't done something in 20 years. Like, you're old.
Yeah,
Like, it just hit me. It's like, yeah, it's the first time in 20 years I haven't been out on the circuit. And it literally has been 20 years. So, yeah, it's been strange. But, yeah. But, we had a daughter. The day of the NBA lockdown. My daughter was born 2 days before that. We got home on the day of the NBA lockdown. So it was like the timing couldn't have been some people would say perfect. I might say divine, but the timing couldn't have been better for us to get home on March 11th. And so we were going to be kind of socially distanced anyway with a newborn. So things didn't change dramatically for us. Now that I'm back at work, or I've been back at work for a while, it's been strange working from home. But the first couple of months for us were great, just because we had planned to be home and isolating anyway.
Yeah. Well, and most people know this too. We came within a minute of moving to Charlotte. Actually, it was Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna move. We found a house. We actually.
Oh, I know Stanley.
Yeah, we were gonna move to Stanley. So, one of those things, man. God just had other plans. We thought his plan were to move us to Charlotte, and then last minute we had a pivot, as you say, and ended up back here in Columbus. So. But you'll understand this. Nobody else probably will. But right before this, I was pregame warm up. I was listening to some Kurt Franklin, "Hero." So.
That dude, that's
right,
man. That album. I love that album for a variety of reasons. So that album I think came out in early 2006.
Yeah.
And 2006 was like by far the worst year of my life. Like, and I don't say that lightly because. We can get into it, but I've had major surgeries, and I've had a lot of stuff happen in my life. But in a 3-month span, my grandfather, I'll call him that. We didn't really have a relationship, but he was my grandfather. Passed away. My grandmother, who I love dearly, my granny, who's really the only grandparent I really ever knew, she passed away. My first nephew was born, and then my Aunt Joanne, who is basically the grandmother of my father's side, passed away. So all that happened between like May and August. So you brought up that album because Imagine Me was like the #1 song for me. I mean, really still ever.
Yeah.
But I listened to it nonstop. I just played Hero over
Yeah.
and over and over that
Yeah.
whole year because it was rough. So
Yeah.
it's just funny you mentioned that because, yeah, Kurt Franklin is probably my favorite artist, really,
Yeah.
maybe ever. And that album is my favorite of his albums, and it helped me through some tough times.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why I remember that, but sometime you tweeted it, and I'm like, I think
Mm,
I commented, and I think we went back and forth a little bit because that's one of those go-tos. That's a healing album, and now we're
mm-hmm.
talking music, but man, that's a healing album. There's that's a good one. So anybody listening to this, go find Kurt Franklin Hero, download it. You'll be glad you did. So,
For sure, for sure.
all right. So you want to talk some hoops?
Yeah, sure, always.
All right. So, man, last year was hard. Well, let me ask you this. So you were there, you said 2000?
I was there. Don't get me started because I was there from 2000 to 2004,
Okay. And
which
so,
is the worst stretch of everything in Carolina history. I've done the math. I went and looked it up. It is
yeah,
the worst 4-year stretch of everything. So
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, that's good. And so just to give you an idea, and I'm going to date myself quite a bit here, but a lot of people think it's Jordan, or they just think I'm bandwagon, right? And people that
Mm-hmm.
know I'm not, because I can name every starting lineup from the first one was J.R. Reed and King Rice. That
Mm-hmm.
I started watching Carolina basketball when those two guys played because my mom, I didn't even know how to play basketball. My mom's like, watch TV. Well, they didn't have cable back then. And
Right.
the team on CBS or whatever channel it was this Carolina blue team with this guy on the sideline. And I honestly, I knew so little that I thought they called him Dean because he was had a position in the university. I didn't know that was his name. That's true.
Right. Right.
And so here I got this guy named Dean, who I think is like the dean of the school, because I didn't even understand college. I'm not that bright. And then there's this guy named J.R. Reed that had this wicked cool box cut, and man, he just dominated. And so I started watching then, and I haven't stopped since. And I think it's only gotten worse over the years, especially if you ask my wife, she'll tell you it's probably gotten worse. Look, look at the color of my office, for goodness sake.
Yeah. See.
But no, it's now it's a passion. My kids all love them. My daughter, and I don't know if you saw that, my daughter actually has had a pretty good chance to go. She's going to stay local, but she's got really good grades. And so anyway, so just so you know, my fandom, how long that stretches back, you're right. That was a rough period. But boy, ever since then, they've been on quite a roll until the last, we won't even talk about the NCAA not violations that lasted forever.
Yeah. So, you said something since we're unscripted. I wanted to talk about it and see what you think.
Okay.
So my fandom in sports, like obviously with Carolina basketball, I wouldn't consider myself as much of a fan anymore because I'm covering all these guys and get to know them. So, I still have a vested interest in it. I don't know, fan might be pushing it a little bit for me personally, but like, I find it interesting because most people, they find the teams that they end up liking are the teams that they had access to on TV or, there's some kind of familial thing.
Right.
So I'm an Atlanta Brave. So when I tell people my fandom, they're like, oh, 1992, obviously. It's like, I'm an Atlanta Braves fan. You know why? Because we watched TBS. That's the only channel that had, outside of ESPN, that had baseball on every night. So the Braves were always on. And Right. So I had TBS. That's why I like the Braves.
Yep.
Dallas, maybe my uncles were front runners. I don't know. But my uncles all were Cowboys fans, and my dad wasn't. And I was like, oh, it's cool. Little rebellious me at, 7 or 8 years old. Like, oh, it's very cool to like a team that my dad hates. So I'm going to be a Dallas fan.
Yep.
And so people, I always find it weird when people like judge why you like a team. Like, who cares why someone likes, the Golden State Warriors? Who cares why they like the Celtics? They like them. That's who they are. And there's obviously, most of the time, there's good reasons. It's not just like somebody decided, you know what? I'm going to be a Carolina fan today. That's usually not the way it happens.
Yeah.
It's TV or family or something like that. So that always bugs me, especially as a Dallas fan.
Right.
Dude, we've been terrible for like 26 years. So how can you call me a bandwagon fan when they've been awful? Like, what am I bandwagoning? I'm bandwagoning mediocrity. So anyway, it's a sour point for me.
I mean, mine's even worse. I'm a Cleveland fan. I'm a Cavs and Indians fan because I grew up there. As you said, it's location.
Right.
the Browns, I was a fan up until, and I just talked about this on the podcast I just posted, but I was a Browns fan up until all the fumble and the drive and all that, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And
Right.
Bo came on the scene right at that time, and I needed a team, and I'm like, I like Bo Jackson. That guy's amazing.
Right.
And then I fell in love with the Raiders. And to your point, everybody's like, oh man, the Raiders, and I'm like, man, we have been horrible for a long time. Ever since the Tuck rule, and don't even get started. Yeah, I'm still bitter, but ever since the Tuck rule, we have been terrible. And now they're still, anyway, again. But I actually did love those Braves teams because I was living in Indianapolis after I graduated all by myself. I didn't know anybody, long story. But so every night I just turned on the TV and it was Dave Justice. And I could get on that lineup, man. I love that team because there was nothing else to watch. They were a team. Yeah. Brilliant move by Turner.
I mean, it's paid off. I mean, you look at some of the baseball ratings even today, and you're kind of like, why is Atlanta, in the top 10, or why are the Braves a team that has national appeal? And that's why. I mean, for people who were fortunate enough to have cable at that time, the Braves were on TBS. For us in favor, it was Channel 16. On Channel 16, almost every single night, the entire summer. And that's what else was I going to do? Yeah, what else was I going to do? So, yeah. Anyway, back to Carolina.
All right, back to Carolina. So, well, first of all, I mean, there's so many questions I could ask you, I think, over the years. But let's not even talk about like the NCAA violation that wasn't, that really was. And as as a guy that's been out there in that recruiting thing, wouldn't you agree that they were on probation without being on probation?
Yeah, I think what happened was kind of, for those not initiated, I guess it was May of 2010. People go back and forth about whether or not this really started it, but Marvin Austin, who was a 5-star football player, was in Miami, and he was tweeting. Tweeting was still new at the time, and the NCAA kind of monitored it. And that little incident back, almost 11 years ago, 10 and a half years ago, started everything that lasted for the next 7 years. So one investigation rolled into another, which rolled into another, which rolled into basketball, which rolled into another, on, and so forth and so forth. So I think as it became clear that the NCAA really didn't have, for whatever you think about everything that happened, they didn't have the authority to punish UNC for what happened, because UNC argued very smartly. They found kind of, I won't say a loophole, but they argued very smartly, and they conducted themselves very smartly. And I think halfway through, once the NCAA started to realize they weren't going to be able to nail them, the way to do it was to kind of extend things a little bit, maybe kind of, file another, for lack of a better phrase, this isn't how the NCAA works, but if you're in court, you file another motion or you file another brief, you just kind of keep things going. So, I've seen a lot of times in lawsuits, lawyers say that, people who have money, they do that to kind of exhaust the other party. And that way they can, get a more favorable ruling or get a more favorable settlement or whatever. So kind of that feel is, I think, what was happening. And I mean, they struggled on the recruiting trail. It's ironic that they also won a title, or went to back-to-back Final Fours with the group they recruited during the struggles, but they couldn't get top 10 guys on campus hardly. There were people who I know would have committed to Carolina if this was, 2011, or if it was now, based upon their profile, who wouldn't give them the time of day, as the old folks would say. So it was very interesting, and how they kind of worked around it. What they did, it was a little bit of a pivot, but there were players who they genuinely liked, like Marcus Page, who ended up, committing to UNC. He I have a feeling, to me, he's the most important recruit of the Roy era. Maybe not the most talented, but he gave them exactly what they needed when they needed it, and how they needed it, frankly. So you start looking at the classes they put together, and they had guys who maybe had one or two issues that kept them from going pro early. And when you have guys that are that good, when the top teams have to recycle and refresh their rosters every year, by year 3, you're going to be the best team because of continuity and guys getting faster and stronger and smarter. So I think that's what they did. But, back to your original question, it definitely was kind of a form of probation. And I think you've seen since everything ended. So it was October 2017 when the verdict came down that there would be no penalties or anything. They've gotten They've signed Cole Anthony, who's a 5-star player. They signed Nasir Little, who's a 5-star player.
Yeah.
They signed Kobe White, who's a high 4-star player. They signed Armando Bacot, who's a high 4-star, 5-star player. Caleb Love, a 5-star player. Dayron Sharp, a 5-star player. Walker Kessler, a 5-star player. So you see the recruiting momentum kind of pick back up post 2017. So all you have to do is look at the results from, say, 2004 when Roy Williams first got to Carolina to 2011, and they were getting 5-stars and really great recruits every year. 2011 to 2007, I guess 2017, it dipped a little bit. Still great players, but dipped a little bit. And then since then, it's taken back off. So you just have to look at the results, and it's pretty obvious.
It was interesting when Vince retired, and I was watching. I think I was watching the game, or I think I was watching something, the highlight package, whatever it was, and I was thinking to myself, "I'm sorry, not Vince, Marvin," because Vince was earlier in the year. And I sat there and I thought, you know what? Like, that is almost as big of an indication of the struggle of those years as just what they had to grind through on campus. Look at the NBA, because it used to be Jordan Worthy, Perkins, You could go down the line, like in the Hall of Fame next door, that list on the wall. Man, the NBA was decorated with guys from Carolina, and they didn't just take up a roster spot. They were the top players. I mean, that's for me, that was always like, anybody say, why do you like Carolina? And you're like, well, let me list you all the reasons why, because it was the NBA. And now you look and there's Kobe. I'm sure there's more, but that list is really small.
Yeah, Harrison's hanging around.
Yeah, having a nice career, but not.
Yeah. As far as kind of that next level of upper tier NBA player, it's Kobe right now. I think Cole Anthony could get there. I don't think people should give up on this year, too quickly.
Yeah.
He had some issues last year, injuries, playing behind some guys. When they signed Carmelo, that kind of put him, behind the 8 ball. He still has a lot of growth as a player that he can go through. But yeah, I think you're starting to look toward the guys like Cole, like I mentioned, and then the guys in 2020, in addition to the guys in 2018, is kind of the next crop. And it's interesting. It's probably a longer conversation, but if you look at Roy Williams' career, he doesn't put out all-stars that often. I think Paul Pierce is still the only all-star. And I've always wondered, I don't have the answer, but I've always wondered, there has to be something, he identifies in guys that maybe, some deficiency as far as, I shouldn't say deficiency, some limitation as far as height or athleticism that maybe he identifies and knows that, they don't necessarily have that all-star level in them, but they can be very good college players and very good NBA rotation players. I mean, Rafe LaFrance and Kurt Heinrich, all those guys were very good and played for a very long time. Drew Good and Nick Collison, all really, really good, but you never thought of them as all-stars. And it's like, well, there's got to be something to this. You can't be as good as he is and recruited as well as he has for more than 30 years and only have one all-star. You would think you'd almost kind of fall into one, for lack of a better term. So I don't know the answer to that, but I've always wondered that. Harrison Barnes, I think, probably was someone who they thought would be that. But outside of him, I can't think of anyone who came into UNC and under Roy Williams and you expected like, oh, this is a NBA all-star level talent. I don't think I've thought, maybe Marvin, just because that was new and fresh and in his second year at UNC. But Marvin and Harrison are really the only two I can think of, honestly.
Yeah.
So all that to say, it's true that, they are going to have to, if they want to maintain that level as far as, NBA tradition and everything, some guys are going to have to maybe overachieve a little bit, pull a Danny Green and overachieve. What makes that more difficult is that, Kentucky and Duke, what they are now didn't exist, when Roy first got to UNC or when Coach Smith was coaching in the 90s. There wasn't that dynamic where the goal was so brazen to say, look, we're a pro team. We're a semi-pro team. And I think Duke and Kentucky have really operated with that pitch for a while now. And it resonates with a lot of kids because, I mean, if someone told me all I had to do was go to Kentucky or Duke for a year and I have a lottery ticket and I can cash it, then that's what I'm going to do.
Absolutely.
So they have to recruit against that, which is a new thing within the last 10 or 11 years. And then now within the last year or so, they have to compete with the G League.
Right.
So the talent just isn't there as much as it was for UNC, because Kentucky and Duke are going to take pretty much every year. They're going to take 5 or 6 of the top 15, more
Great.
than likely. And
Great.
then the G League is going to take, probably 3 or 4 of those guys. And then you have Carolina, Kansas, Arizona, the rest of the bunch kind of fighting over what's left.
That's right.
So it is a little harder to have those kind of stud, super athletic, NBA All-Star types, because there's so many other places they can go
Right.
to get, similar things.
And there's two things I wanted to ask you in that. One of them, I have an remarkable amount of Duke friends, and I'm not sure why. But some of my best friends are Duke fans.
Good people who make bad decisions with their fandom.
That's true. I can't
Yeah,
help it.
there you go.
I can't help it. I try. But no, great guys. And, one of them once told me, it's cyclical. Like Carolina's up and Duke is down. Duke is up, Carolina's down. I think that's been a little bit true the last few years. This was back in the Hansbrough ages. So Duke was obviously getting, being dominated by Carolina at the time. But my perception was, and maybe this is wrong, and I'd be interested in your thought. I feel like Duke was successful for a lot of years because K would get guys that, like a Nolan Smith, 2 points a game his freshman year, player of the year, and he kept them for 4 years. Shire, I mean, you could go down the list of guys that probably he went out and got these guys, and by their senior year, junior year, they were really, really good. And in the meantime, Carolina's over here just raking in talent, and they were just outscoring it. Like, they were just doing their thing. And now I feel like that has absolutely switched. Now the game's changed, obviously, with recruiting and all, like you said. But I feel like those two have switched now, where Roy is the one that's developing a guy over 3 or 4 years, if you can keep him that long. And in the meantime, K is just a revolving door of 5 stars, like you said. Is that true, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look at that team with Zion. I guess it's 2 years ago now at Duke.
Yeah.
How was that any different from UNC's like '98 team with
Right.
we had Vince Carter and Antoine Jamison, and to some degree Ademola Okulaja was like the third guy, and Shamon Williams. Like the teams were built pretty similarly, like super athletic, high end, maybe 2 or 3 guys, and then there wasn't much left on the bench from there, and they had to beat people that way. Like their stars had to be overwhelming, and I think that's kind of where Duke is right now, and it's a choice that they made. Frankly, to me, it seems like it's a choice they made right after they lost Harrison Barnes. And you talk about cyclical. It's funny because I remember that was November of 2009 when he announced his decision, and everybody thought he was going to go to Duke, and he goes to Carolina. And Carolina fans they were feeling themselves. They were so excited. They had just come off a national championship, and Hansbrough had never lost at Cameron, and they just signed Harrison Barnes, and they had another recruiting class coming in that was great from 2009 with, at the time it was I think it was number 1 and number 2 with Travis Ware and Dexter Strickland and McDonald and Henson. Like, at the time it looked great on paper, and then you had already had Kendall, already had Reggie, then you had Harrison. It's like, man, they are set for a long, long time. And Zeller was still there, and there was just talent flowing through. And you couldn't have told a Carolina fan then that, hey, in the next few years, Carolina's going to struggle. They're going to go through this academic thing. Duke is going to get, every 5-star they want. They're going to be on top of the world. They're going to win the national championship in 2015. They never would have believed you, because it seemed like that was going to finally be the thing that started Duke's kind of descent, not into mediocrity, but not being, a top 1 or 2 program. It reminds me of how people are with Tom Brady. It's like every time there's like a little small, like, thing in the armor, they're like, okay, this is it. Finally, Tom Brady is, not going to be what he was. And, then last week he goes out for 355 and 4 touchdowns or whatever it was. So, but similarly, at the same time, Duke fans in about 2015, 2016 were like, we just signed, Ja Okafor and Tyus Jones, and we just won the title. And Carolina has all these 4-year guys, and they're done. We're hot stuff. We've got it. And then they make, 2 they make 2 Final Fours in a row, and then they're number 1 seed the next year. So it is cyclical, and we'll kind of see. I'm not sure where it's going to go next, because I think both teams have a ton of talent this year. I think they will for the foreseeable future. But it's curious because, Roy is not getting any younger, and Coach K isn't getting any younger. So I think whoever makes the best hire when that time comes in the next, 4 or 5, 6 years, will be the one who kind of ascends, and the other one probably will take a step back.
Yeah, and that's exactly. I remember all that. I felt all of that when you were saying
Hmm.
it. I remember watching the Skype announcement and losing my mind. Like, we are loaded forever.
Right,
We're gonna be loaded. Like you said, the
right,
Bears. I mean, we got two bigs, they're brothers, and then everything just went horribly bad.
right.
And I don't want to keep you too long because I
No,
appreciate
you,
the time, and I can do this anytime, and hopefully we can do it again.
yeah.
So let me ask you. With that, I do like this class this year a lot, and maybe I like them too much because I've fallen in that trap before. Like you said, on paper, there's times where you're like, this is the thing, but I do feel like this team, and I do like the language that I'm hearing, and maybe even something you've written is what's coming out of there, that Roy's not happy, because
Hmm.
that's a good thing. Like, I keep calling it the revenge tour. I feel like Roy's going to have, if he can, this team's going to be ready. And I love our bigs, that we have so many great bigs. I say we, like I went there and I'm on the team. But I like their bigs.
Yeah.
I like what they've done, and I like what Roy's put together. Is it fool's gold?
I don't think so. I mean, think about it. If you're Bo Jackson. You've been successful at everything you've ever done. You've been in All-Star games in two different sports. You've been a Pro Bowler. You've been, you've just done everything possible. And then you have the worst year of your entire athletic career. I don't think you would expect someone to be like, oh, whatever. It was a bad year. Let's move
Yeah.
on. These, as you know, the people who are successful at this level of athletics are different. They are,
Special.
yeah, they're just unique people. And I think that motivation that they have to not lose is almost as important as it is to win. And I think Roy Williams has articulated that a little bit over his career, how he's tried to enjoy the wins more as
Yeah.
opposed to hating the losses. And so I think though last year, is his worst season as a head coach since 1988 or 89. And, the only way that those guys know to kind of get over something like that is to work harder and push. And I think you're seeing that from the reports that people are coming out with early in practice. And
Yeah.
it was for my money, the recruits that he got were such a perfect match for his demeanor that he's going to have the majority of this year, because all those guys are in their own way super intense and really serious about basketball. Like, sure, they like to have fun, but there's not that kind of really kind of goofy guy who,
Yeah.
even though he's a great player, he's just kind of aloof. There's not
Yeah.
that with these six, freshmen. They are all really, really serious about basketball and about the things that it can afford them if they do what they're supposed to do. And they all also have a bit of a chip on their shoulder for one reason or
Yeah.
another. So I think when you add all that up, the losing from last year, the way it ended, the last time we saw Carolina basketball, they were getting destroyed by Syracuse. I mean, they looked lifeless against Syracuse. So add all that together with everything that's happened, with Roy Williams not being able to get out and recruit, because he's mentioned several times that recruiting is kind of his solace. It's what he loves to do after a loss. There are several times where they'll have a game against Georgia Tech or somebody, and he'll just be like, you know what, I didn't have fun today. I'm going to fly to Las Vegas and watch this kid. Now, he might fly to Las Vegas for other reasons because, he loves the poker table. He loves craps, but, he see a kid in Texas or see a kid in Florida. He'll do
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
a lot because it helps him kind of move on from the losses. And he said all this stuff publicly, so I'm not breaking any news or
Sure.
anything. But all that to say, I really, really think that, it is a bit of a revenge tour. And I think I know he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that doesn't happen again. I think he feels like he let the program down a little bit. And, he's tough on himself. And he said that before. Again, things he said in public, he's tough on himself. And I think he wants to make sure that the Carolina brand, so to speak, is restored. Even though it was just one off year, he wants
Right.
to make sure that Carolina basketball is back where he and his fans think it should be.
And that's the thing about Carolina. When you have one off year, that's everybody's homecoming parade.
Right, for sure.
I mean, and that, especially, I don't want to say it too loud, but they lost to Ohio State, and I live in Columbus. And even Trill, what's his name? Club Trill. What's Titus? What is his name?
Titus. Yeah, Titus. Yeah,
He
Titus.
tweeted today. He tweeted something today, and I just saw it. And I just had to roll my eyes. Like, come on, man! What, 1-9? One win out of the last 9. Come on. I mean, come on. Like, and on
And it
top
was
of the deals, Baycott got hurt in the first 5 minutes. Cole wasn't right. The team was terrible. I mean, they just had a ton of injuries. And
yeah.
Ohio State was playing, they peaked really early in the season, and they were playing at a high level. They really were. But
Yeah, I was gonna say that first half they played well. The second half, Ohio State didn't play that well. Carolina was
oh,
just that was one of the worst performances I've watched. And I was in school at 8-20. So if
yeah,
anyone's qualified to talk about really bad losses, I am, because I sat in the Smith Center for all those terrible games. But
yeah,
that was up there. But yeah, I just think when it comes to Carolina, people like to settle scores, and it doesn't happen often. You think about Carolina fans. How often do they reference Pete Gaudette and Duke in 1995? Like
right,
all the time, because that was really the last time that they were, really, really bad.
yeah,
So whenever you get a chance, because it doesn't happen often, you have to take advantage of it. That's
yeah,
what a lot of fans did. And I think all that stuff is sometimes the motivation stuff can get overrated, but
yeah.
I think for this particular team at this particular time, it's not. And I think they'll remember that, and they'll kind of channel that.
Well, I love to hear it, and based on my years of experience, watching and reading, and so you're a lifeline for me. Adam Lucas. First of all, is he as great as he seems? Because he really seems like a great guy.
I actually never met him in person.
Okay,
Yeah, I actually never met him in person.
he
But I
is
mean, his
awesome.
name, his reputation precedes him.
And his
But,
writing is fantastic. Just even as a
right,
writer,
right,
forget even if he was writing not about Carolina, he just nails it every time. And
right.
especially after a tough loss or something, like he just reading his stuff just makes you feel better. So if you do ever run into him, let him know he's got some fans in Columbus, because I have another friend that lives here that we're obviously big fans, and we always talk about Adam Lucas. Like, did you read it? Did you read it? And
Right,
I
right,
all the time, like, you got to read this, because
right.
it's that thing that makes you feel a little better after a loss.
Hmm.
Something,
Hmm.
he just captures it every time, makes you feel like you were there. He's just
Right,
a fantastic writer. So
right, for sure.
yeah. Well, man, we got to do this again, and hopefully maybe we'll come on during the revenge tour. I did see today. Did you see today the 2 announcements? Iowa potentially for Big Ten Challenge,
Hmm.
which who knows if that's even going to happen.
Yeah,
And then Ohio State for the CBS Made for TV Championship Classic or whatever in Cleveland.
I know. I thought about you. I was like, huh, if there's fans, maybe you can make it.
2 hours away.
I would say that's not far. Yeah, it's not far, is it?
No, that's
Yeah.
the beauty of it, that we always have. So I'm 3 from Louisville,
Hmm.
3 from Pitt. I think I'm 3 from Notre Dame. So every year we look at the calendar and we see what game can we get to and get home. And sometimes I've even with football, I went over and watched Pitt play Carolina on a Thursday night game
Hmm.
back when they had Switzer and all that. It was
Oh
awesome.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
the ACC title, I think, or the lead or the championship of, not the championship. They were tied for first.
Hmm.
Carolina went in there, and we had a great night. Got home about
Is
3
that
in the morning.
is that the one Switzer returned a couple of
Yes.
punts? Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a close game, and then everybody
Hmm.
around us, all the Pitt fans, were like second half team, and then Carolina just came out and did their thing. It was great.
Hmm.
Those were a couple of fun years, and I love Mac being back. I think you said something too that I've heard Max say, that Roy, he's enjoying the wins more and he's not getting so hung up on the losses. I think I've heard them say that about Mac quite a bit in his return as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it from a personal perspective. My dad is 71, so he's, I think, a year older than Roy, and we don't live forever.
Right.
And I think especially when you hit something about 70 with my dad, I think hit him pretty hard. Like, wow, I'm 70. He
Yeah.
thinks of himself like he's still 35. But I think, once you hit that point, you start to realize that, the years in front of you are much fewer than the years behind you.
Right.
And you have to start appreciating things while you're here. And I don't mean to sound morbid or anything, but I think it is something that kind of clicks for people, and it's different ages. But I do think, it's for Mac, I think it's because he lost it. He admitted that things didn't end the way he wanted to, in Texas, and the time off kind of revived him, especially being back at Carolina, because the first time I don't think things ended the way that anybody wanted when he
Mhm.
left the first time. And so being able, 20 some years later, to come back to help rebuild a program that he loves very much, I think, it's just easier, and you have different perspectives in life. Same thing with, Roy Williams. I think, he still hates losing. Don't get me wrong. Like, really, really hates losing. But he said that just as he's gotten older and, had grandkids and his children are getting older, that, perspective is very important. And sometimes it's age for people, sometimes it's experience. But I think for these guys, even as uber competitors at the top of the food chain, it still happens to them too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last two questions, and I promise I'm going to let you go because
Oh, you're good, man.
I really want to do this again. I've enjoyed this so much. I mean, you
Good.
know, like it's so good to just want to talk to you, meet you. Again, a huge fan of everything you do and following you. So
I appreciate that.
last two questions here. If Roy resigned today, who takes over?
Oh man. Oh God, I wasn't expecting that.
This might be a pass. I don't know.
You said today?
Let's just say Roy pulls a Dean Smith, walks in and
Uh-huh.
says, I'm done. Who's taking over?
Yeah, I think
Robinson, right?
Steve Robinson takes over.
Right.
Yeah.
But let's say, all right, so Roy retires.
Mm-hmm.
But you touched on it, Roy and Kay. So that's the second question is
Right.
the other guy. Who's taking over?
Man, that is hard. I think there'd be a national search, honestly.
Really?
I think there would be a situation where there'd be factions within within Carolina. So you would have kind of the traditionalists who want someone who believes that the Coach Smith, Coach Williams DNA is an absolute requirement for Carolina basketball, and that not having it makes it not Carolina basketball. So
Yeah.
I think there'd be that group, and then there'd be the other group that say Carolina basketball is about winning and excellence, and you should try to win and be excellent no matter how it looks stylistically. So I think there'd be that group, and then in the middle would be Bubba Cunningham, and I think he would have the final decision, but I think Roy Williams would have a lot of input on that decision, considering Carolina had to lure him. It took the second time for Carolina to lure him, and then he stayed at UNC. In spite of everything that happened during the 2010 to 2020 or 2010 to 2017, basically. So I think he would make his desires well known. Yeah. So I'm dodging your question because I'm trying to think of the actual answer.
Couple of names I always thought of. I'll give you a few. Well, first of all, HubieD. Could HubieD do it or no?
He could, but I think, when Roy Williams got the job at Kansas, he was Carolina's third assistant, and then they hired him to take over one of college basketball's best programs. Yeah. That won't happen today.
Right.
I think I'll take that back. That won't happen where another blue blood hires the third assistant from another school to be their head coach. Right. Could it happen at UNC if Roy Williams pushed hard enough and said, I really believe in this guy, give him 4 years to try to figure things out. He's got the Coach Smith DNA. He's got my DNA. He was a player in the NBA. He exudes confidence. He's everything that we want as a head coach at Carolina. I think he could convince Bubba Cunningham to hire him. Whether or not Coach Davis is ready, I don't know if it's fair for me to say. Yeah. I just think that's a big stretch from being an assistant for 7 or 8 years to head coach at Carolina. Yeah, that's a heavy ask for someone. So even for someone like him, maybe it would be in their best interest to go somewhere else and be a head coach for a few years. I don't know, but I don't know if he can do it or not. I would just say that would be very, very difficult. So I'm going to go TBD on that one. Okay. The name I've always thought, and I think people maybe there's some history with Roy, so maybe it wouldn't happen. But if he was available, like Billy Donovan, to me, would be like a home run. Like you couldn't do any better than that. Now he's got another job. So I guess, or has he got another job?
Yeah,
I know
somebody in the NBA.
He's with the Bulls. He's with the Bulls.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So he's kind of out of So he's kind of out of the mix. But whenever someone asks him, like, oh, Billy Donovan would be absolutely perfect. From there,
I was going to go with a different BD.
Who's that?
Go. Well, no. Did I say it right? Brad. What's Brad Davis? Is that his name? The Celtics.
Oh, Brad Stevenson.
Brad Stevens. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Brad Stevens. Sorry. Yeah.
And so I have a friend that told me an inside story about Brad Stevens when he got the call for the Celtics. He was in a pretty sweet spot, and he called Thad Matta because they are good friends and the Butler connection. And so he called Thad, and Thad said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go make more money than you've ever made. And I'm telling you right now, you will get fired. Because, they were horrible, right? But they were loaded with picks, and they made some trades and things. But at the time, they were bad. He goes, you're going to get fired. And he said, go make more money than you can even imagine. And then when you get fired, you're going to have any college job you want. Because he's, and all he's done is actually risen his stock even more.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if he wanted to exit the NBA, I always thought, man, that's a guy that potentially would have a nice long career, and maybe it's going to be at Duke. I don't know,
A
but I
lot
have
of
a feeling that guy goes to a blue blood.
a lot of people think that, but and see that goes back to my question about stylistically and DNA and all that stuff, because the style of play that he had at Butler, whether or not he keeps that up at UNC, is
Physical.
very different. It's a 180 from North Carolina's kind of up and down under Roy and to
Right.
some degree under Coach Smith. So there are a lot of people. I have friends who feel that core principle of up tempo big man basketball is so permanent for UNC that going away from it would be basically eliminating Carolina basketball. I
Yeah.
don't know if some people agree. I'm sure there are a lot of people, but I
Yeah.
think that's a consideration that would come up. I think if Bubba Cunningham is still the athletic director, you kind of have to look at his football hires to give you maybe some thought into how he might approach a basketball hire. Now, obviously, it's a little different for a variety of reasons, but with Larry Fedora, he was fine taking someone from, I guess a lower level, in quotations, a lower level
Yeah.
of football and asking them to come up and seeing if they could do things. And for all the flack he gets, Fedora did take Carolina to the ACC championship game, which is
Absolutely.
in their probably their third or fourth best year in 30 years. So he did give them that. He gave them a lot of excitement, and
Yep.
for the first part, sold a lot of tickets. So I wouldn't call that hire a failure.
Right.
I think it just, the natural course of things, you don't really expect coaches to be at places, 10, 15, 20 years most of the time. You have to have someone really special that you found for that to happen.
Yeah.
And then he hired Mac Brown.
Yeah.
So two very, very different hires, really, to me, on the end of the spectrum. One, a retired coach who had been working for ESPN for 5 years, who
Yeah.
had coached there 20 years before, and the other, kind of an upper-comer, younger guy from a small school. So I think he's shown his versatility in how he looks at hiring. So it's really hard to handicap, honestly. I
Yeah.
would just say that there's going to be that fight, kind of to to use a campaign slogan for the soul of Carolina basketball,
Right.
because it's
Right.
going to be the two camps, and then Roy's going to have his say. But I think Bubba's going to make sure that he doesn't make an emotional hire or
Mm-hmm.
make a hire out of pressure. So you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have all that stuff and boosters. It's going to be very Game of Thrones-ish whenever it happens, I think. So
I love it.
it'll be fun to cover, I think.
You don't have to answer the question then. We'll save that one for the next podcast.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I mean, honestly, I can't think of any name. Like I'm answering I'm thinking out loud, and as I'm thinking out loud, I'm like, we have to consider this, and you have to consider this, and you have to consider that. So honestly, I have no idea. I'm sure there's like 3 names that they have in the desk, and
Absolutely.
that they would want, but I have no idea who they are.
I was always kind of hoping it was Buzz Williams because I'm just a Buzz Williams guy. Like I really think he's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he did a good thing by getting out of Virginia Tech while he could. He went, made his mark, and now he's someone because he's never going to win. He wasn't going to win in the ACC at Virginia Tech. I just
Right.
We all know that it's the same as Ohio State, Michigan here in the Big Ten. It's,
Right.
In football, you're always going to be fighting a battle you may never win. You might win some games, but I don't think you're going to win the ACC.
Right. I thought Shaka might be the guy, honestly.
A long time. He hasn't really moved out in Texas.
He hasn't done anything. Yeah. I'm not sure what the issue is, because he's recruited, as well, if not better than Carolina for some of those years.
Yep.
I don't know if it's one and done talent or players not buying into what he was doing at VCU, but he kind of, to me, I thought, I was like, this is a guy they can get. He's a guy who's coached, kind of in the region, who would come to Carolina. It seemed like a perfect fit. He was winning in a small place and, making his mark, and it just hasn't worked out as well as I think anyone wanted at Texas for whatever reason.
I feel like they don't play with chaos.
Yeah, they don't. I don't know why he left it.
To your point, you brought in 5. No disrespect to any 5-star, but the 5-stars don't have a chip on their shoulder that says, think about VCU. Those guys fought because they weren't a 5-star. They were underrated. They had chips on their shoulders, and they would play just breakneck all game long. And then I don't think he has that at Texas. To your point, he's playing more talent, and those guys probably don't want to. I don't want to say they don't want to fight that hard, but they don't have that get down on the floor chaos. So when I watch a Texas game now, I'm like, where's chaos? Because that was awesome.
That's a great point, man. I mean, well, I always talk about Kenny Williams and how people are like, oh, he's a bulldog and this. He was committed and signed to VCU to Shaka before Carolina, and so he's the kind of perfect in my mind Shaka player. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just that the talent level and what he wants to do schematically just aren't matching up because those guys, don't want to do all that. That's as good as any explanation I've heard, because it is kind of puzzling, because I consider him a really good coach.
Yeah, he's a great coach. He actually went to college about 8 miles from where I did up here in Ohio, a real small school called Kenyon.
Oh, so random story. I know Kenyon College for one reason. So remember I told you to bring stuff all the way back full circle, that I went into corporate communications.
Yeah.
So the company that I worked for was a company called Corning Incorporated, and it's headquartered in Corning, New York, but they have an office in Hickory, North Carolina, which is home of course I forget his name now.
Brad Doherty?
No, Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes, Tennessee head coach. Rick Barnes is
Yeah.
from Hickory, North Carolina. Went to Lenore Ryan College, which is in Hickory. Anyway, the CEO of the company I worked for, his name is Clark Kinlan. He went to Kenyon College.
Really?
So yeah,
it's almost like Duke. It's real small, and
yeah.
it's got the kind of Gothic kind of feel to it. Great school. We used to go over there and hang out a lot because I went to a little Nazarene school, so we go over there and get in trouble. But anyway, podcast. So. All right, so that's your assignment, because as I want to do this again, you got to come up with your list of 5 coaching prospects for Duke and Carolina, and maybe throw Kentucky in there if you got time.
See, I think Duke will. I think Duke would just go ahead and hire John Shire. I think I see that coming for them.
Yeah.
I just don't know if Carolina is at the same place, because whenever somebody says no disrespect, they're usually about to disrespect. But I think Carolina, even though I know Duke has had some historical success, Duke is much more of a Coach K program, and I think Carolina is much more of a program. I mean, Carolina has, I think, 2 of the 5 best coaches of all time in college basketball. 100%. No one comes even close. And in addition to that, they have another coach who made a Final Four in Bill Guthridge, and another coach, even though people don't talk about him, who was AP Coach of the Year, Matt Doherty. So you'd be hard pressed to find a school, even with the way that Doherty's tenure ended. Bill Guthridge actually went to 2 Final Fours as a head coach. His final year, he went to the Final Four. Yeah. So what other program do you know of that has 3 head coaches who went to multiple Final Fours? And you'd be hard pressed. I might look that up after this. You'd be hard pressed to find it. But I think it's going to be a little bit easier for Duke to transfer the reins, just because whatever anyone who's coming in contact or been in Coach K's orbit, I think they're going to want to keep that kind of quality around. Whereas Carolina, I think they're going to go for someone at least who's kind of in the middle, maybe who has some outside ideas, but still has some of that connective tissue to Coach Smith and to Coach Williams.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. And I do think that there's a Coach K factor, whether we all want to admit it or not. And there's a factor that at some point in the game, when he casts his shadow, that John Shire's not going to be able to cast that shadow.
Yeah, and I mean that's they always say you want to be the guy who replaces the guy,
not the guy that replaces.
Right. Yeah, you want to be the guy who. You want to be third, not second. Like
100%.
So I'm with you. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you so much. You said this right before we got on, and it's just stuck with me. That you can pretty well put together somebody based on just following them along long enough on Twitter. I'm ruining the quote but you said it much better. But your point was, you can follow somebody and really kind of put together a pretty good feel of what they're about and who they are. And I already had huge, not only say expectations, I already had huge thoughts of you. And now I just think even more. Like, this was great.
I appreciate it, man. It's been good. It's been great.
Time. It's a lot of fun. And again, thanks for being that lifeblood for us. We really appreciate it, and keep doing what you're doing. We get us through a revenge tour. Get us at least in the Final Four. Okay.
Yeah, and just a quick shout. Just urge everybody, if you're interested in North Carolina sports, just check out InsideCarolina.com. That's who I write for. We feel like we have a pretty good product, so check us out.
Yeah, and then I'll put, and I usually ask that, man. Thank you for.
Oh yeah, no problem. I was just trying to get in there before the end.
No, links. So InsideCarolina.com. You've been on some podcasts, and a lot of those are you're on the Inside Carolina podcast sometimes too, right?
So I do sometimes during the season. I probably say half of the time. Dewey Burke, who was a walk-on and played at Carolina with Tyler Hansborough in that group, he'll do the post-game podcast, and then probably half the time I'll do them. And then I have another one that I'm on called Coast to Coast, which is kind of a hybrid recruiting / current team podcast. with Sean Moran. It's hosted by Joey Powell, and we do that off season. We do that every other week, and then I think during the season we'll do it every week.
Is Joey Powell ever going to come back to Twitter?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so.
he was a favorite for me. I honestly,
Yeah,
he was a
he's
favorite follow.
he's Joey's a really good guy. He does really important work. If I'm allowed another plug, he works for
Sure.
an organization called MeFine. Basically, they assist families who have children in the hospital, whether it's paying medical bills or giving them a place to stay or paying for food. So the organization he works for does really good work, and I think he just really wanted to focus on that because Twitter can be as good as it is, where people like me and you can meet and
Right.
talk and exchange ideas. It also can be kind of the sewer. So I think I think there was too much sewer coming his way. So he just said, you know what, I'm going to take my talents elsewhere. He's still very active in the Carolina community, just kind of behind the scenes and on IC doing podcasts. So.
And did you give us the link for MeFine?
I think it's just mefinefoundation.org, I believe is what it is.
Find it. I'll
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but let him know he's got fans that miss him.
Will do.
Because
Sure.
he get in there Twitter and mix it up. He get in them Twitter wars.
Yeah,
they're kind
he
of
would.
It's like watching a car wreck, Not that it's fun to watch, but
We enjoy it from the same hometown. Went to the same high school. His little sister, who she likes a different persuasion of blue, if you will. Me and her have been arguing about those two schools since like second grade.
Yeah.
So they're just really good people.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't surprise me that they hang out with you then, because that's I'm a big fan. So I'm gonna go listen to some Kurt Franklin.
All right.
And we'll do this again, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yes, man. Yes, sir.
Right.
I said
Go
yes, man.
Heels.
Sorry. Yes, sir. All right.
All right. See you.